WatchCharts is the world's leading secondary watch market research platform. Dive into the data yourself at WatchCharts.com. Watches and Wonders is going on in Switzerland right now, and it's the biggest event of the year in the world of watches, where pretty much every brand under the sun announces new releases for the year. What we want to do in this video is look at the watches that came out last year and see how they've done more or less a year on from when they were first released. The way we're going to do this is basically cover a handful of releases from some of the brands and talk about the retail prices, their current market prices, and so give you a sense of what their current value retention looks like, compare the relative performance of each reference against the market index that we publish on WatchCharts.com, and then do that for a handful of brands. Every watch we'll cover here, you can go and look at in depth on our website. And of course, this is not meant to be an exhaustive list, more so just a sort of snapshot of some of the things that we find interesting. So let's get into it. We'll start, perhaps not that surprisingly, with Rolex and talk about 4 different releases from them last year. The Air King reference 126900. This was announced at Watches and Wonders with and has a current retail price of $7,450 with a market price of $9,200. So that's a value retention of 123%. The Sprite GMT was also announced at Watches and Wonders with a retail price of $11,450, and this trades at around $23,800 today for a value retention of 208%. The Deep Sea Dweller, reference 136660, has a current retail price of $14,460. This also trades at a premium above retail. And then lastly, the Yacht Master 42, reference 226658 in yellow gold, has a current retail price of $29,200 and trades a little bit above that. If you go back and look at the last video we published about Rolex watches that are available below retail, then you'll find that this is one of the watches that can, in fact, be found below its retail price on the current market. And so the chart that you see here compares the performance of the Rolex Market Index over the last year with the performance of each of these 4 references. The index is down about 24.5% over the last 12 months. And each of these watches is also down a little bit over that period of time, but to varying degrees. The Air King is down comparable 26.5%, but the Sprite GMT is down considerably more than that. And that usually happens because these references that are hyped, certainly like the Sprite GMT was, tend to trade at a massive premium right out the gate when they become available on the secondary market. And so even though the drop over the last year looks like it's substantial, some of that is just explained by the fact that its starting price was incredibly high, because that's when a lot of concentrated flipper activity happens. Certainly there's a very, very few pieces available. So, because supply is low and demand is high, secondary market dealers are able to command more of a premium, but its current market price is more in line with, the other GMT models in stainless steel. The Deep Sea Dweller, by comparison, has sort of been more steady. In fact, we didn't even see the first listing for this watch until October 2022. And since then, it's sort of more or less held steady at its current market price of just about 15% over retail. And then lastly, the Yacht Master is down a little bit since its release, but similar to the Sea Dweller, has not seen a crazy drop in price, probably also because it did not see an incredible amount of hype when it was first released. Next, we'll talk about Tudor, and here there's 3 major releases that we want to cover, but not all of these are from Watches and Wonders. The Black Bay GMT Steel and Gold and the Black Bay Pro did come out at Watches and Wonders. These had retail prices of $5,850 and $4,150 respectively. They both trade at a discount over their retail prices, with the Black Bay Pro still retaining 87% of its retail value. And the difference here is probably explained by the fact that this is still a bit more of a hyped watch than the Black Bay GMT Steel and Gold, which being two-tone is just, from a design standpoint, not quite as popular. It's also in the larger case size compared to the Black Bay Pro, which is at 39 millimeters. So that also goes some way towards explaining why one has retained more value than the other. The last one, of course, on this list is the Pelagos 39. This was actually announced on August 30th. And currently trades at a very slight premium over its retail price. But as we've seen with Tudor releases in the past as well, generally these have 100% value retention for some period of time after they're first released. And then as subsequent releases become available on the market or the hype around those specific references dies down, they tend to settle at a little bit of a discount or a significant discount below their retail prices. It's happened to the Black Bay 58s. It has certainly happened, as we can see, to the Black Bay Pro. And this is purely my sort of expectation that for the Pelagos 39 as well, we'll see the value retention drop as more and more time passes. And so if we compare the performance of these watches to the market index for Tudor, what we'll see is that the Tudor index over the last 12 months is down 13%. The Black Bay GMT Steel and Gold and the Black Bay Pro exhibit substantial decreases in value. And that, again, is because the initial prices for these watches were, because of the hype around them, inflated. And then as those prices have sort of come back down to earth, they've settled at levels that are considerably below where they started. Since the Pelagos 39 is still sort of in that initial honeymoon period, as it were, it's only down 3.1%. But what you'll see is that from the time it first became available, it actually spiked in value for a little bit when it first came on the secondary market before sort of, taking a steady decline down to a more reasonable or relatively more reasonable valuation. The next brand we'll talk about is Omega, and here I will cover the CK859, which is just an absolutely gorgeous sector dial, manually wound dress watch with blued steel hands. This was announced, all three of these watches were announced at Watches and Wonders. This one has a current retail price of $6,500, but a market price of $5,900. So pretty respectable value retention of 91%. The second one is the Seamaster Diver 300 meters with the green dial, which has a current retail price of $5,600 and a market price of $5,500 for a very healthy value retention, 98%. And then lastly, the Speedmaster Moonwatch Professional in gold, on a gold bracelet for $39,400 at retail, but with a current market price of only $29,800. When it comes to the market performance for these watches, what's interesting is that the steel references seem to have done not as well as the precious metal reference in this case, and the market index for the brand is sort of in the middle between the two. So over the last 12 months, the market index is down 6.7%. The two steel references are down 9.4% and 9.2%. And the Omega Speedmaster is only down 3.6%. What's interesting about the CK859 is, even though it's been discontinued, it's still down 9.4% and hasn't seen any sort of bump in its value on the secondary market, even though the overall Omega index certainly has regained some of the lost ground, bottoming out sometime in November and December, and recovering a little bit since then. IWC is also an interesting brand to look at because they had some very interesting releases, not just at Watches and Wonders, but also later in the year, tied to the Formula One race in Miami in May. The references that came out at Watches and Wonders, the 388106, 389105, and 389106, all chronographs in the Top Gun family. The first one in just sort of a black gray ceratanium, and then the other two in the white ceramic in Lake Tahoe and green ceramic with the woodland. have all done a pretty respectable job of holding on to their values. So the 388106 is at 96% value retention on a current market price of $12,100, whereas the other two trade at retail premiums over retail. The Lake Tahoe has a very respectable value retention of 126%, whereas the Woodland also sits slightly above its retail price with a market price of $11,000. The fourth watch, however, which is the Pilot's Watch Chronograph 41 Mercedes-AMG Petronas Formula One team in titanium. This is another watch that we talked about in a recent video around value retention for watches that are not sort of from the usual suspects. Has a current market price of $9,400. That's a value retention of 120%. So, this is just more evidence that if we look just a little bit farther afield from the usual suspects, we will find watches, and in fact, in this case, almost certainly a big set of watches from the same brand that do hold their value quite well. Comparing their performance to the performance of the IWC Market Index, we'll see that each of the releases has sort of fallen in value a little bit, but that in each case also that's been driven to some degree by higher prices perhaps at the start, because these are somewhat hyped pieces. Each of these was incredibly well received by the enthusiast community, and I think that goes some way towards explaining why the overall trend over the last 12 months for their performance is a downward one, even though with the exception of the Top Gun Titanium, which is still at 96% value retention, they all trade above retail. Lastly, we'll sort of close off with Audemars Piguet, and here we'll talk about 4 different references, all within the Royal Oak family. The new 37mm reference 15550ST, that's in steel. The Royal Oak Jumbo 16202, also in steel, and then the chronographs at both 38 and 41mm in steel with blue dials. All 4 of these watches were announced at the end of January 2022, so a little bit before Watches and Wonders, but they've now been on the market for a considerable amount of time. Each of these trades at a healthy premium over their respective retail prices, ranging from 156% for the 38mm chronograph to 3x retail for the Royal Oak Jumbo. And what makes those premiums even more interesting is that they have come down over the last year. So each of each of these new references, when compared with the index, is actually down over the last 12 months. So they actually started out at even higher prices than they currently command on the secondary market. This just goes to show you that when it comes to the big 3, Rolex, Patek, and AP, they are the kings of value retention, and it's the demand for these watches is so high that relative to the available supply, these watches continue to command a considerable premium. So this was a sort of quick summary of some of the brands that released watches from last year. There's obviously a lot more that we didn't cover, but if there's any brands in particular that you'd like to see us cover next, definitely let us know in the comments below. Also, if you think there are releases happening now this week in Watches and Wonders that you think will do as well or even better than some of these performers that we've covered, let us know about those watches in the comments too. Thanks for listening.